Coming up on this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast.
You worked at Microsoft, you worked at Instagram, some of the biggest tech companies out there, but you decided to make the jump and bet on yourself. Why did you leave?
And I realized the return for me personally was not nearly as much as if I started my own thing.
Will AI replace the recruiter?
I personally don't think so, or at least not anytime soon.
Welcome to the Elite Recruiter Podcast with your host, Benjamin Mena, where we focus on what it takes to win in the recruiting game. We cover it all from sales, marketing, mindset, money, leadership, and placements.
Hey recruiters, have you heard about this tool? You have to check out HeyMilo. It's the AI-powered tool that's revolutionizing the hiring process. With HeyMilo, you can scale your time and interview more candidates in a fraction of the time. HeyMilo uses proprietary AI for two-way conversational voice interviews, giving you the edge you need. Hundreds of recruiters and hiring managers are already using HeyMilo to streamline their workflow, boost their success, and making 4x the placements. Ready to transform your recruiting process? Check out heymilo.ai and start making more placements in less time. You can try it out for free today. HeyMilo, thank you for sponsoring the Elite Recruiter Podcast.
I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. I have my special guest who's going to talk about how you can utilize AI to save time. And what is time? Time is money in recruiting. Time gives you the focus where you can focus on the right things, focus on the relationships. And that is how we make money in recruiting. So I am so excited to welcome Sabashan from HeyMilo to the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you for having me, Ben. We've chatted a few times in the past and excited to finally be on the podcast.
So AI is going to it's one of the things right now, artificial intelligence. I think a few people saw some really crappy ChatGPT messages, some really crappy ChatGPT content. And they're like, AI kind of sucks. AI is a fad. AI is just game over. I think that things are different. I think AI is going to absolutely change the game. And it's actually one of the reasons why you are going to be one of the featured demos at the AI Recruiting Summit. So I'm so excited about you sharing there also with everything that you guys are doing. But let's dive in. Okay, first of all, what is HeyMilo? And then we'll kind of walk into how you guys started there.
Yeah, definitely. So HeyMilo is an AI voice agent that enables companies to interview and evaluate candidates through a two-way conversational interview. So we started building HeyMilo almost a year ago. And the idea was we as hiring managers in the past used to do a ton of screening calls. And we realized that a lot of the recruiters that we were working with were kind of struggling to scale their time. And we're struggling to evaluate candidates for more technical roles. So we built HeyMilo to kind of solve that problem. It's since kind of evolved to going after high volume jobs, non-technical roles as well as technical roles. And we've been kind of just adapting to kind of customer demand and where the market's kind of taken us.
So you actually were one of those hiring managers. You got a background at Microsoft, Instagram, some big tech players as a product manager. How'd you roll from there into the recruiting space?
Yeah, definitely. So a big part of what I would do at Microsoft and Instagram and then at other companies as well, also helping my friends who were startup founders, was helping them interview candidates, right? And I saw kind of the struggles that they would have in regards to being able to, scale their time when they were startup founders. And then I saw myself and my team spending 20 to 25% of our weeks just interviewing candidates, right? And it was insane. And when we talked to our recruiter counterparts, we realized it was difficult for them to also, scale their time. We realized there was a lot of intricacies in regards to how they were evaluating candidates that were difficult for them to do because they were scaling to so many different roles from product management, engineering, designer roles, all sorts of, other roles in between as well, right? And so me and my co-founder, we resonated with this problem in regards to, helping companies interview candidates more effectively. We've also been on the other side as candidates where we weren't really happy with the way interviews were conducted by companies. And so we kind of were all right, we gotta there isn't really anyone solving this problem right now. And with all the stuff coming out generative AI, we can go in and transform this space. And so that's kind of how we went from being, a tech lead and a product lead, now building a startup in the recruiting space.
I had a guest on recently, Luki, and who actually did a great breakdown of what he does with the hiring managers he's worked at. And he actually ran the numbers. And it's just if you're looking at hiring these many engineers, you're also losing this many thousands of hours in time for these engineering managers in interviews, which you got to factor that into like how much time that they're supposed to be building a product.
And it's a lot of context switching too, right? Like you're busy working, right? Building your product, right? And then you got to go do like a 2-hour like session of like interviews with like candidates, right? And then there's all the follow-ups and stuff like that. And more I realized so many of the candidates are coming through the funnel, right, to us, right, as hiring managers, were not qualified or were barely qualified, or like they were able to answer the basic screening questions and get through that first round, but clearly we're not a good fit still, right? It was something that like my team used to always complain about, like I complained about all the time to like my managers and like my directors and so on. So yeah, here we are with HeyMilo.
That is awesome. So like you initially had the idea of HeyMilo. And what have you guys learned along the way through testing and dealing with customers and, seeing the changes that you guys went through?
Yeah. So a lot of things, right? I think we realized how important it was to have a really solid candidate experience. Companies aren't going to deploy HeyMilo if candidates don't actually want to conduct the interview and aren't having a good experience while they're doing the interview. That's ultimately going to reflect poorly on the company, right? I think we realized like how important it is to customize, HeyMilo for different companies' needs and even different roles. And so there's been all sorts of stuff that we've had to do to kind of allow for companies to really customize HeyMilo for their specific hiring needs. And then the third thing is like just the importance of integration in this space, right? There's so many different recruiting tools out there, from like different ATSs to different ways to source candidates, right? Having a way that you're able to easily integrate and then push data across different systems is super critical, which were things that I think when we initially started HeyMilo, we kind of overlooked, but we quickly realized how important they are, and they've helped us kind of grow and ensure that customers are happy using us.
So talking about ATS, there's like 1,000 different ATSs out there, but there's a few big players. But one of the hardest things that I've seen many recruiters is actually updating their ATS.
Yeah.
Can you guys like automatically update these conversations and get it dropped in there?
That is like definitely the plan, right? So once we do integrate with an ATS, or as like new versions come out and stuff like that, we are compliant based on like the APIs that we're using. Luckily, most of the large ATS have like API kind of like deprecation paths, and we're able to easily like push the new API if needed, or they kind of legacy APIs are until the new versions and all that kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
But the idea is that once you get HeyMilo set up, you don't have to, especially for some of these roles that are super high volume, right? You don't have to go in and constantly have to like update it or change it, right? There's as little manual work as possible for the company.
Awesome. So like flipping gears, and we're going to talk about just like recruiting artificial intelligence. I'm super excited about the summit. How can recruiters overall, and this is the lens that you have an AI tech recruiting company, but recruiters, how can they overall utilize AI to get ahead or even just stay relevant?
Definitely. I think a lot of different ways, right? Number one, when you look at what a recruiter does, they're usually like the first touch point with candidate, right? But oftentimes for roles, there's so many different applicants, right? It's hard for them to kind of, scale their time, right? So using AI to even like handle that first touch point with candidates is becoming more and more critical. And there are a number of companies kind of doing that. And then when you look at it like a layer lower, right? Actually being able to like do those initial screens. Doing an initial touch point is great, but like you need to still like figure out if they're a good fit, right? Being able to scale those conversations and taking that kind of unstructured data from conversations and turning them into insights is becoming increasingly like critical. There's a few different players, kind of solving that, including us, right? And then from there, like actually like automating, like, once they've gone through like the deeper levels in terms of the interview, like the actual hiring manager round, maybe a few on-site type interviews, actually automating the process around getting them an offer, getting them answers to questions that they might have to ultimately get them forward and actually accepting the offer, right? I've seen a few companies actually going in and solving that, right? Where you have chatbots available 24/7 to answer stuff about, okay, what does the benefit package look like in this scenario? Can I take time off if I have this issue, etc. So I think just like kind of the end-to-end experience, right? Of like, how you engage with the candidate is being transformed with AI. It's critical for recruiters to kind of adopt these things so that they're able to, number one, scale and stay ahead of the curve, right? You're seeing a lot of these tech-enabled recruiting agencies kind of grow really quickly because they're adopting AI, right? So I think some of the legacy recruiting agencies need to do so as well.
Like between like agency and internal, or people that have their search firm and internal recruiters, who do you see utilizing AI the most?
Right now it's 50-50, I'll be honest, right? There's times where I think it's more the recruiting agency, and then there's times when I see it more internally. I think there's different reasons why both ultimately want to adopt AI though. Agencies want to do it so that they, are competitive to their clients that they're acquiring, and they're using that like a selling point, right? And they're using that as a way to kind of help them make more by interviewing more candidates and all that kind of stuff. While for companies, it's more of like a cost reduction initiative, right? A lot of these companies have like, scaled down their recruiting team. And they're not looking to maybe rehire because they're still kind of going through this period of like cyclical hiring, right? Like they might have a couple of roles here and there. So it's been 50-50 in terms of like where we've seen more adoption of AI, but like for different reasons ultimately.
Do you see a point in time with some of these large companies where they're going to spend more money on AI tools than they will like on additional recruiting headcount?
It's a good question. I don't know if it would ever get down to that point, but I can see it definitely where AI tools supplements the team, right? It's part of the budget in terms of like hiring plans. So instead of like you hiring 5 more recruiters, maybe you hire a couple and you buy a few seats for these AI tools, right? To either scale interviews or scale candidate touch points, etc.
Hey guys, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And also make sure to hit that little bell so you know when the next video drops.
We have like a time period where I think we can make the most impact with artificial intelligence when it comes to recruiting, and aka make the most amount of money. How long do you think that like financial window of opportunity really is to take advantage of AI before literally everybody's using it?
Interesting. But I think for like recruiting agencies using AI as their selling point to acquire clients, right? I think that window is probably closing in the next couple of years, right? I think every recruiting agency is going to be leveraging AI in some form. Otherwise, you're going to become basically irrelevant, or you're going to be losing a lot of customers, or you're not going to be that efficient, right? So I'd say in the next couple of years, but I do think that how well and how much these different agencies and companies are utilizing AI, like I don't think we've seen the full extent of that. And I don't think we will in like the next couple of years. I think it's just going to be like an exponential curve where people are using AI more and more intelligently to do what they need to do, right, over time.
Okay, so it's not going to be like, hey, we have like a 1-year window to really make some money. It's like we have multiple years to really take advantage of the opportunity, learn the AI, and utilize it.
Right? Like I don't think it's going to happen like super instantly. And I think it eventually will become kind of table stakes to use these AI tools to stay relevant. But how well you leverage it is where there's going to be different agencies at different levels, and like that's going to be growing over time, right?
I know we were talking offline before we hit the record, and one of the things you were talking about is like when it comes to a recruiter's database, it is one of the biggest things that recruiters have. They talk about, but they almost never actually utilize.
Yeah.
How can AI help keep their own database and candidate pool fresh? We're always sitting on this gold mine that we tell our customers about, but we almost never use. We just go to the first available people.
100%, yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing that we've seen, right, with agencies is like they have potentially even millions of candidates who they've interviewed once, right? Or maybe they've like contacted once for a role, but they ultimately didn't get the job. And they're now just like stagnant in their database, their ATF, their CRM, whatever, right? And it's difficult for the agencies to, get their recruiters to basically find these, second place candidates, right, for additional role and leverage that candidate pool to really monetize additionally for, new opportunities that come up. And so what we've had a lot of companies do now is like they're using HeyMilo or, whatever voice agent you might want to use to interview these candidates now at scale, right? And keep their candidate pool fresh based on new job posting. And we're actually seeing some companies actually use that as a way to win deals where they're like, hey, like we already have these candidates. They just, did a screening interview with HeyMilo, which is based off of your job posting, right? Here are the top 10 candidates that we interviewed. Let me know if you want to hire one of them. And then companies are looking at, our agencies are looking at doing that as a way to make additional kind of revenue, like win additional clients rather.
And, it's when you're an agency, it's who has the client many times is the one who gets paid, or who has the candidate is the one that gets paid.
Exactly.
When it comes to AI and recruiting, is there anything that recruiters should actually be worried about, especially with like this legislation that we're seeing come about?
Yeah. I still think that like AI, you don't ultimately want it to make your hire. You still want to like use it as a tool where it's maybe like collecting information from the candidate, right? Maybe doing like a basic screening interview or doing collecting some additional info after a screening interview. But if you're automating it to the point where you're making like pure hiring decisions and like trying to remove the recruiter, I think that's when you get into kind of dangerous territory, both in terms of like from a legal perspective, right? based on the laws that are out there in New York and Illinois, I believe, right? As well as in terms of like actually being like leveraging AI effectively. There is still an amount of human involvement required to actually kind of vet these candidates, right? Make sure like potentially they're the right cultural kind of fit. And so, yeah, I think that's when like you're getting into kind of like dangerous territories from like a regulations legal perspective and actually making the right hire.
Awesome. So I got to ask the question, especially since you're definitely in the AI space. Will AI replace the recruiter?
I personally don't think so, or at least not anytime soon. I do think it will supplement the recruiter, and I think it will help them, for example, not have to do as many screening interview calls, right? Which is kind of the problem that they're tackling, but allow them to focus on the right set of candidates, right? I still think that like you're going to need human recruiters for that, right? I also think human recruiters are going to be the ones who are going to be managing these different AI tools, getting them to work properly with each other, right? Setting things up, right? Monitoring, right? But in many ways, AI is going to augment every single role out there, right? From like product management to software engineering to you name it. So I think it's going to augment recruiters the same way it's going to augment product management, engineering, and so on. But it's not going to replace these roles. And it might change the role significantly, but it's like I still think recruiters are going to be required, right? Just their role and their day-to-day, I think will be, definitely super different in a couple of years from today.
If you want to go live, I really want to get this trending. The job of a recruiting engineer, who's the one that's actually in charge of like building, like working with all these platforms, working with all the data, understanding the artificial intelligence. So that's a goal I have, is to get that job actually trending.
I like that actually. Like that makes a lot of sense, right? Like a person who builds integration between the tools, right? Configures the agents. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if recruiting engineer is a job title that you should probably like file a trademark for that right now.
We'll check that out once we get it done with this interview. But all right, so I'm going to jump over the quick fire questions, and I want to take this out on as a bit of a founder's approach, because you're a tech founder, but also at the same time, there's a lot of people that have their own agencies, and like being a founder and running a business is a completely different skill set than it is, especially when I was an internal recruiter or when you were internal working at, Instagram and Microsoft. So people that are looking at making the jump to owning their own business, setting up their own company, like what advice would you give to somebody that's actually just starting out?
I think number one, you got to be passionate about a problem that you're looking to solve, right? Number two, I think you have to be a little either hungry or like there's got to be this itch inside of you to want to do something different against the grain, right? Go outside of like the typical 9 to 5 to want to start a company. And then number three, I think it's really important to have, a good partner, right? When you're starting like a startup business or like a venture type scale business, right? I think if you don't have, any one of those three, like it's a recipe for disaster. Yeah.
When it comes to partnership, I think that's one of the toughest things to do, because like you're literally marrying somebody, building this business together. How do you go about finding that right co-founder, the right partner? Because I've seen it blow up so often in the recruiting space.
Yeah, I think number one, it's someone who shares kind of a passion for the problem that you're solving, right? That's really key. Number two, it's ideally someone you've worked with in the past and maybe built things together with, or maybe started a business with, so you know what it's like to kind of work with them, right? And number three, it's someone you can get angry at, or you can get upset at, right? And you can get in the trenches, but you can go to war with the person. If you can't do that, right, I don't think you're gonna have a happy partnership, right? Because the startup journey is a story of ups and downs. It's kind of like the stock market in a way. Over a long period of time, it's going up for a little bit, then it goes down a little bit, then it goes up over a little bit, and then ideally, if you need to compound and like continue to improve the company, if you're addressing customers' problems effectively, right? Like you'll see gradual growth, right? Up and to the right? Ideally, right? Assuming there's a market there and all the other crazy variables that are involved, but it is a story of ups and downs as things are maybe getting better. So you need someone who you can go to war with and get angry with, have hard conversations with, but deal with it in a very effective manner, right? And so luckily, my co-founder, we've known each other for a while. We've gone through that. Like we've gone through the ups and downs. It's our second company together now as well. So yeah.
I love that. Somebody that you can go to war with, because, whatever business you're starting, especially recruiting business, like you are literally in the trenches every single day.
Yeah.
Like you are going to war. You worked at Microsoft, you worked at Instagram, some of the biggest tech companies out there, but you decided to make the jump and bet on yourself. Why did you leave? Like, did you always have this itch? Because you could have been safe working at those companies for the next 3 decades.
Yeah. I think for me, I was doing a lot of 0 to 1 stuff at these companies, at these big tech companies. So I was on like other early PM on Microsoft Teams, and then later with working on Instagram Reels on the recommendation platform in the early days as well, right? And so something I realized was like, I would spend so much like time and effort like helping like these products grow, right? And I realized like the return for me personally was not nearly as much as if I started my own thing, right? And was to grow it from 0 to 1. And I felt like I was putting in so much energy for these different products. I kind of wanted to do it for myself. And so I was looking for a while at like kind of different problems I wanted to solve. And so that's eventually what led us to build our last company, Refer Market, right? Which is kind of a problem that we saw based on the people in our networks and all that kind of stuff. Inequality with people, we grew up back in Toronto versus like people in like SF, Seattle, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, like it was just like an itch, right? It was like this desire to kind of like create something that I could say was my own and I can spend, morning to night working on and know that like I was building it for myself, right? In a way.
I love that you just also said that, like the morning to night, like when you're starting everything, like recruiting business, tech business, like it takes a lot of momentum to get like, over the first hump or over the first hill.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes into my next question. And, this probably helps because you've exited a startup already, but what advice would you give to experienced founders to keep on seeing success?
What advice would I give to experienced founders? I think we're still in the process of becoming experienced founders ourselves, right? I'm going to like say that before I give any advice to experienced founders, but I think when you've seen some success, right, you need to still stay hungry. There still has to be this motivation for like, okay, like I really care about this problem. And you want to see what you're building ultimately through fruition. I think that's like very important, right? I don't know, when I talk to some folks in my network who have like sold companies for like hundreds of millions of dollars to like billions of dollars, right? I think they all have this like internal fire in regards to like seeing a different world, right? And so they're like fixated on like making that a reality. They have almost this like, they almost cannot see a world where that future vision which they're trying to build towards isn't a reality. And I think you need that, right? As like an experienced founder or like as someone who's like building multiple companies. Those are the folks that I've seen like be the most successful, right?
So take that question and kind of like break it down into just in the rec tech side of the house. Other founders in the rec tech space, what advice would you give to them?
I think in rec tech, because it is a more crowded space, you got to spend a lot of time making sure you're solving the right problem that doesn't have a bunch of solutions around, right? And when you think it's a problem, you need to go really deep into why it's a problem, why other folks haven't solved it. I think that's something that's really key. I think you have to also have experienced the problem if you're like trying to build like a solution to it, right? That you have to like really put yourself in your customer's shoes, or you should be the customer yourself. I think that's where I've seen a lot of rec tech founders struggle. They're like product manager and they're building some random thing in an area that they haven't really experienced themselves, right? I think luckily for me and my co-founder, we kind of lived through this problem, right? So we kind of understand it from that perspective. But I see a lot of folks, like, for example, building sourcing tools and they've never like done sourcing before, right? So that's really key, I think, as like a founder in the rec tech space, right? I think also be ready for investors to turn you down, right? It's a space that most investors don't want to invest in, right? It's like not the easiest market to go after, but if you really care about it, right, you see a problem that hasn't been solved effectively, then it makes total sense to go after because there is money to be made in the space.
I always see the occasional rec tech founder bring out this product. They've never touched recruiting. They've never done anything about recruiting at all. And you're kind of just like, did you even talk to a recruiter?
Yeah.
Did you even like talk about this? But at the same time, I've also seen some rec tech founders that knew nothing, have no recruiting background, completely kill it.
Yeah. You want to drop a name right now?
I'll save that for like later, just so like, we're talking about you and not a bunch of other products, but there's some like people that have just absolutely done it. Like, I don't know if done the research or like actually, like you said, like I've lived, breathed, and went through this problem day in and day out. It had a financial impact on everything that we were doing company wise. Like, let's work on trying to solve that. So jumping over to the next question I have for you is, has there been a book that has had a huge impact on your own personal career?
There's been a lot of like podcasts, I'd say, that have had like a lot of like a big impact on me. I think like 20 VC is one that's been really helpful. I was like in my early days as a founder and even to this day, This Week in Startups, right? I think is another big one. In terms of books, like I think there's like the classic ones like 0 to 1 that's been like really helpful. But I'm honestly not the biggest book guy. I kind of like doing things firsthand. So apart from 0 to 1, I can't think of anything else that's been really, impactful, right? I think I've had a lot of peers in my circles, though, that have been very impactful to me wanting to become a founder. I've seen people build companies kind of, both from my class at Waterloo, right? As well as place old coworkers at Microsoft, Instagram. So I think that's helped drive me to want to do that as well and seek similar success. But yeah, apart from that, I think that's where that's kind of where my motivation kind of comes from.
So you're saying mentors have had more of an impact than
big time,
books.
Yeah. Big time, not much of a reader.
Has there been a mentor or two that you love to like that you've learned a ton from?
I think my old director at Microsoft, right? I won't give him I don't know if I can say his name right now, but he was someone that I learned a lot about in regards to how he thought about product and also how he managed. He had this way of motivating folks, which was really, really amazing to see. And then also the product lead over at Instagram that I worked with, right? He was amazing, his ability to focus on the right things, right? And use data to make decisions. So those are a couple of folks. And then, yeah, there's been a ton of folks at the startup accelerator that we were at, ERA, that were really helpful, right? From the sales mentors to product and engineering mentors. Yeah.
So as a founder, you have your great days where everything's freaking awesome, sign those new clients, but there's a lot of days that are just hard. How do you get yourself through those hard days and those hard weeks?
Alcohol definitely helps. But beyond that, I think you gotta keep looking at what's next, right? And see that there's still additional opportunity, right? And focus on that. Obviously understand what has led to the low, right? If you lost, maybe a contract with a big customer, figuring out what you did wrong. Was it the customer support side? Was it on the product side? Was it on who knows what, right? And obviously taking those learnings and learning from them, but then still looking at what do we have next, right? We still have additional opportunity, ideally, and focusing on that to ensure that you can keep pushing forward in the journey.
And that kind of goes into the next question I have is, and this is one of my favorites. So I'm going to ask it kind of two ways. First is just going to be just basic career. If you had the chance to go sit down with yourself at the very beginning of your career, probably at Microsoft, with everything that you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
I think continue to stay hungry in terms of wanting to learn as much as you can. Try to meet as many different individuals with different perspectives as possible, right? Continue to do that in your career and continuously look for where there are areas or problems to solve within the organization, the product, etc. And don't be scared, regardless of how early you are in your career, to voice those as things that should be improved and bring those up to the right people or go and solve them yourself. That would be the advice I would give to myself if I was, day one at Microsoft or someone was just starting their career. I think so much of when I first started, I was okay, I got to play within my bounds, right? I'm, I started as a software engineer before I became a product manager, but I was so in my bubble of okay, I'm a software engineer focusing on this area of this product, I should be building in this space, right? But I wish sooner in my career, I started just looking outside of that kind of bubble and looking at ways to improve and just provide impact, right? It would have accelerated my growth and my learnings a lot earlier.
Same question, but looking back at the first month or two of HeyMilo, everything that you know now with working with customers, acquiring the customers, working with the recruiting companies, if you had a chance to sit down with you and your co-founder and just have a cup of coffee or grab a beer,
yeah,
what would you tell yourself?
Good question. I think the biggest thing I would tell us would be seek the customers that are actually willing to pay. Don't spend time with the folks that just think this is a hot product. And there's a big difference there. The folks who are willing to pay actually have this problem, right? And they're going to give you way more helpful feedback and that you're going to be able to iterate with them more effectively versus the folks that are, looking to work with AI companies because it helps their brand and all that kind of stuff. That's not going to take you very far. And I think we wasted months, I'd say, right? Working with the wrong set of customers who didn't really have a problem in scaling their interview, right? If you just started seeking the folks who were actually willing to pay because it was already costing them a ton of money to scale their recruiting teams, or they were losing candidates because they couldn't interview even a fraction of them, right? So that would be the number one advice I would give us.
Talk about a lesson learned right there.
Yeah. Yeah. But of course, correct, Bell.
Which is awesome. So for people that want to follow you, how do they go about doing that?
You can add me on LinkedIn. I've been a little quiet on LinkedIn, and then we talked about this. I will be upping my LinkedIn game, but send me a connection request. I love popping out with calls, but potential folks who resonate with the problem, right? Or just kind of interested in kind of AI in general and continue the conversation. I said LinkedIn is probably where I'm honestly most active. I was going to shout out my Twitter too, but I think I got 10 followers, so that's probably haven't been in a year.
I was ready to give you a hard time. I'm like with everything you're doing, all the recruiters that you're working with, you should be like on LinkedIn way more.
I know. It's coming. I'm going to up my LinkedIn influencer game pretty soon. You're not going to be able to like turn me off. Yeah.
Well, now, before I let you go, is there anything else that you would love to share with the listeners?
I mean, I think just in general, like it's been tough for a lot of recruiters over the last couple of years with like, hiring kind of like freezing at a lot of companies, right? So we've seen a lot of recruiters kind of get laid off. We've seen agencies like lose business, right? But I do see like a re-acceleration occurring, right? And again, I don't think for the recruiters who are worried about AI replacing their job, right? Like I wouldn't view it as that. Like AI is augmenting every job in the world, from the most white collar role to blue collar and everything in between. So being open to that change is going to make you a 10x recruiter, and it's going to help you be able to drive value to your business, right? So that's the advice I'd give to recruiters, both internally at companies, right, and also on like the agency side.
I love that, a 10x recruiter and recruiter engineer coming out of this conversation.
I love recruiter engineer. I'm actually going to adopt that.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on here. Like I said, I'm super excited about having you at the upcoming AI Recruiting Summit. So make sure you get registered. Make sure you check out the HeyMilo demo there too. And for the listeners, I want you guys to keep crushing it. I want 2024 year to be your best year yet. And I want you to take advantage. Don't forget the hard work and the work that recruiting requires to win, but take advantage of the AI and AI systems that can help 10x you. All right, guys. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe and register for the AI Recruiting Summit, where you get to listen to some speakers talk about how you can utilize AI and also see a bunch of AI tech demos so you can figure out what your tech stack wants to be. I cannot wait